everybody, this is AI with Dr. Craig Hansen. I'm delighted to have Maurie and Jim here with us today from AI Ed Pro. We're real educators doing interesting things with AI and supporting teachers to do amazing things. Good morning, good afternoon.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good afternoon. Yes, it's
Great to
big
have you
time
both
difference.
here. Hey, look, I love
Thank
looking at your website and seeing the interesting things you're doing, the Kickstarter program, and particularly because you actually are educators that have been in schools for a long time. You understand what a teacher's life is like. So how about, would you both like to share your backstory? And the interesting thing is that you're actually married and working together. So tell us all about it.
Maurie, that's you.
Jim, go ahead.
Okay.
Oh, is that me?
No,
Backstory.
you're first.
Okay, so I'll go first. So we are married. We have been married for a very long time, I guess 40 years now. Jim, we were high school sweethearts. So, I mean, that a lot of times that doesn't last very long, but it did. We have survived. I was in the private sector for a long time, and then I got into education in about 2005, I guess it was. I spent a lot of time in the classroom, had a maker space, got to do all sorts of really great things with 3D printers and laser cutters and a lot of technology based. Technology is definitely my background. And then I became a school counselor, and then I became an assistant principal during COVID, which it was very stressful during that time. So when a opportunity came up for me to go back into the technology department as a system administrator, I did that 2 years ago. I am still on campuses all the time doing teacher training. And then of course, when AI happened over a year ago or so, Jim was very obsessed with it. And I in turn became obsessed with it through like osmosis probably. And we now go out to conferences and into other school districts in all of our copious amounts of spare time and train teachers, administrators, technology directors on what AI is going to do for K-12 education.
Yeah, my name is Jim Beasley, and Maurie just told you our backstories are so intertwined you can't really separate them. But since we met in high school, but I actually was in the private sector. My background is computer science and computer engineering, and so I was in the private sector. I worked for companies like Dell and Motorola. I did a lot of hardware design. I did a lot of software design, programming, all that kind of stuff. So pretty hardcore technology. I used to travel the world training people on biometrics. I worked for a company that did fingerprint sensors. It's actually the one that's in your iPhone. I worked for the company Apple bought that actually did that. So I was part of the software design team that worked on that. But anyway, about 20 years ago, Maurie convinced me, along with the superintendent of the school at the time, that the school desperately needed me. And so I took a massive pay cut from the private sector and came to the public. And Maurie was certain. I told Maurie I was going to stay 2 or 3 years and just kind of fix everything that was broken, and then I was going to leave. And I've been here for almost going on 20 years, and I guess I haven't fixed everything yet because I haven't left yet. But I got involved with AI actually I've been aware of machine learning and the foundations for AI for a long time. About 3 years ago, I started an internal chatbot that I just wanted to do some basic material in it for teachers to use instead of constantly asking me questions. It was just me being lazy. I was tired of answering the same question over and over again. And around that time, after a couple of years of working on it, kind of playing with it, then the large language models came out, and I got obsessed is probably the right word. And so I revamped the whole thing and created a tool we called Agnes as an onboarding tool for specifically to now use the large language model. And I had, ingested information like HR, no student information. This was stuff like, human resources, employee handbooks, student handbooks, all this other stuff. We ingested all that into it and then rolled it out at the beginning of the last school year for teachers to have access to be able to answer these questions. We piloted it. It was mediocre in terms of acceptance. People, as Maurie said earlier, people really didn't know what it was. So it was an interesting experiment because a lot of them just didn't care. What they really wanted us to do was solve other problems. And this was a particular problem that I wanted to solve worse than I think some of them did. But it actually didn't turn out too bad. I'm revamping the whole thing now to do. I want it to be more of a internal communications that happens to also have good AI functionality built into it. So I'm kind of revamping the whole thing now. And plus, there's been a lot of changes in the last 18 months since I integrated the large language model into it. So it's been an interesting journey. I'm the technical resource that Maurie drags along. We do the trainings. Typically, she does about 80% of it, and then I do, anybody who actually wants the technical stuff, that's what I do, which some people are interested in.
Just before we started recording, we were chatting, and Maurie was saying about often principals, teachers, leaders don't actually understand what AI is. And when you jump into a training, the participants want to know the backstory for AI and actually have some theory or some concepts in their head rather than just jumping straight in halfway through, as you were saying. Tell us more about that and how you handle that and how deep you might go without scaring them away or making them go to sleep.
The funny thing about that story, hold on, before Maurie gets into that, the funny thing about that story was we had gone to a TCA conference. We were doing training, and I had just convinced her before we went there that we had been doing this enough now that we kind of needed to shift more toward different applications and less of the intro stuff. And I happened to be sitting next to a teacher on that train, and I was just talking to her, and she literally told me the exact opposite of what I thought. And Mari's sitting there going, aha, see, I told you so. I told you, she was sitting right next to me. And so the story actually kind of evolved from my belief that everybody knows. So now I'll let Maurie finish the rest of that story. I just thought that was an interesting part.
Yeah, I mean, the situation, I did an article for a Medium article that was, I'm up to my bottom in alligators, why I don't have time for artificial intelligence as a teacher. And one of the things I really addressed in there is that teachers have so much going on in their classrooms between chronic absenteeism and differentiation and language barriers. And I mean, I could go on and on coming from a counselor standpoint of just the stuff that they're dealing with, social emotional learning and stuff that they're dealing with in the classroom. They really don't have time to learn yet another tool. And a lot of them, I think we're seeing AI as just something that we're going to have to learn. And they were going to have to, go to all of this training and it was going to be just another thing they were going to have to do. And so the first thing that we cover when we do trainings now is we're like, okay, this is really not another tool, because when we go in to do the trainings, we don't do it based on something that somebody else has produced and put out there. There are a lot of companies out there that are doing things with AI, and they've got a really great maybe user interface, or they might already have prompts created for you, so you don't have to really think about what you're doing. But when it comes right down to it, they're all using the same back ends for their products. So when we go in, we're like, okay, we're going to learn the top four. I mean, we might talk about, Claude, definitely Chat GPT, the top four. And that way, if one of those tools goes away, you don't have to worry about it. It actually happened to me when I was a teacher. We were using a tool and I had everything in this tool. And I came in one morning and the company had gone under and all of my data was gone. So now we're like, okay, let's not do that. So that's the first thing that we do. The other thing that we really do immediately, especially with our secondary teachers, is we get the elephant out of the room. We talk about cheating and we talk about how students use it and the fact that students know about it. They've watched all the TikTok videos. They know more about it than we do. So we get that out of the room. And cheating is something that there's not one tool that's going to catch a student cheating. It has to be a process. And coming from that principal background, you have to have your ducks in a row. Here's what you do. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, before you come to me and get me to make that phone call to a parent. So we teach that process. And then after that, we just really start diving into what it can actually do to help address the chronic absenteeism, because kids are absent because they're not engaged. They want to be at home and they want to be on their video games. They want to have their phone in front of their face. They have that immediate dopamine boost from all of that stuff. Exactly. So they're not engaged. So how can AI help with engagement? How can AI help with differentiation? How can AI help with help you with all of your administrative tasks? The biggest one, how can AI help you with translations with that language barrier? So, and yeah, we try to fit all that into an hour whenever we're at a conference, but whenever we actually go in to train at a school system, we're looking at 3.5 to 4 hours to actually get them comfortable with artificial intelligence.
Hmm. How much is too much, or how much do teachers, educators need to know about the technical side, LLMs, and all of that?
Jim, that's a
Well,
question for you.
you know, typically I try to leave some of that stuff out, like the historical foundations of, where did it come from and what is it? And that's one of the things that the teacher on the train told me that they didn't want to leave out. They wanted to have some of the context. I think I try to keep it fairly high level, whenever it comes to understanding it. You don't really need to understand, neural nets and weights and biases and all the various, technology terms that get thrown around, but you do need to understand or they seem to want to understand some of the basics functionality only in the context of why does it matter to me? And it matters to you because one of the games we play with them is I'll ask them, I'll make a statement, and then I'll say, what's the next word? What comes next after I make this statement? And most of them look at you like, I have no earthly idea. And I said, exactly, because you don't have context. Well, context is
Mm,
everything to an AI. So if I give you more context, now you probably have a better shot at knowing what's next. And so we go into it at that level. We don't go into it a whole lot deeper than that, unless somebody asks. The biggest question I got to ask over and over again is, which company should I invest in? Like I'm some kind of investment banker. I mean, if I knew how to invest, I would be rich. I wouldn't be working for a school. So, but they all, which company is going to own this? And if I make a comment, they still they're writing it down, which makes me very uncomfortable. So, but the technology, the technical piece, it really does vary with the audience. We've had one guy that's from a school district. He's been to 3 different conferences and watched us all 3 times. So his questions tend to be a lot more technically detailed because he's seen us 3 times now. So it really depends.
yeah. You're speaking, Maury, about translation. And do you find that there is a way to get really good translation and live translation, maybe in a classroom where there's a new student from a new country who doesn't understand English?
Yes, absolutely. So one of the things that we do at the very beginning of our trainings is I will ask the app on my phone to basically introduce itself to my audience. I'll say I'm a presenter. I'm going to be doing some training on AI. Can you please introduce yourself? And it will do a really good job of introducing itself. And then I'm like, can you please redo your introduction in Japanese or in Spanish? And usually there are, especially in Spanish here in Texas, there is someone in the audience who speaks Spanish. And so we always ask them, how did it do? We also ask our Spanish teachers, how does this sound? How did this translate? And so far, you can get down to the nitty gritty of this is a dialect that's in a little bitty town south of this place, but normally I would say 99% of the time they say it's absolutely good enough. Is it perfect? No. But if I'm sitting here trying to communicate with a student who has just moved in from a foreign country and doesn't know a word of English, as a teacher, good enough is what I'm looking for. It's better that than nothing at all. Now, I am really excited about the 4.0 because I was telling someone yesterday, I was dealing with a situation to where they did not speak English. I do not speak Spanish. I am able to pull up on my phone, but it wasn't like back and forth. Whereas from what I've seen with 4.0, it's supposed to be to where, and the demo shows that it is, to where I can say, anything you hear in English, please say in Spanish. Anything you hear in Spanish, please say back in English. So not only does that give it a little more of a back and forth, because if I say something in Spanish to my student and they respond to me in Spanish, I'm not going to know what they're saying. I don't speak Spanish. So in small towns, rural America, to me, this is what's important, because in the larger towns, you have the bilingual teachers. In small town America, we have a difficult time finding bilingual teachers at all. I mean, it's difficult to get staffing that speak multiple languages in small town America. So I am very excited about it. I also like the fact that I have one of my 4th grade teachers that she's always doing stories. She'll take her 10 words that are her weekly spelling list. She'll have the AI, ChatGPT, write a story on her 4th grade level using those 10 words about a certain character with a certain plot or certain setting or whatever it is she's trying to cover. And then she has it rewrite the same story on a 3rd grade level, because you have all those different, especially after COVID, you have
Brilliant.
multiple levels of reading in your classroom. And then she'll have it do it in Spanish.
Fantastic.
And so, yeah, and so then you've got the kid who's seeing it in English and
Mm,
seeing it in Spanish, and it's helping them learn the language, I
mm,
feel, quicker.
beautiful.
Yes.
And the
And
new
then they have a
model,
classroom discussion. In the classroom discussion, they're all talking about the same character. They're all talking
Mm,
about the same setting. So then as a counselor, you don't have that kid who's on a level 2 reader that's having to read a totally different story. So they're more involved in the classroom discussions, which for social and mental health, that's huge.
and the new model that she was talking about a second ago, I've got the Mac. I downloaded the Mac app, the Mac OS app for it. So I'm using it on my desktop, my Mac desktop, and it's really, really good at that conversational piece. I also bought a little toy that Maurie disapproved of, but I really like it, called a rabbit. And it's actually a really good little translator tool, the little orange thing. I don't know if you've seen it or not, but it's a little orange thing you hold in your hand, you press a button on the side, and it's got a little rabbit that comes up and you ask it a question. But you can say, I want you to everything you hear, just like she just said, you can do it on that, and you can hold a little device. It's got an amazing little speaker on it too. So I think it's a great little translator tool. But I think generally that kind of functionality, because of tools like the 4.0, which it
mm,
does it faster, then it's more interactive because it's faster, and it's also cheaper to operate, so we can integrate the functionality in. Cost has been a really big issue with us as to how we roll this out in education,
mm,
because all these wonderful things you talk about they're great if you can get them in the free version of ChatGPT, but even then you still have to deal with the other stuff that you might want. If you start trying to interact with the APIs directly, it gets expensive and in a hurry. I mean, to the point where we can't afford it. So cost has been a real driver in this new thing that I'm building, the new Agnes that I'm building now.
And I did want to discuss that with you. Everywhere I get the opportunity to speak about this, I do emphasize that AI is the biggest equity move that a school could make, particularly in New Zealand. But there is that opportunity for the digital divide to become much, much greater, and a
Oh yeah.
reduction in equity because of the cost factor of developing innovative solutions requires the technical expertise and absolutely using APIs, and you pay for it. I did want to get your feedback on that from what you're seeing with the schools that you work with around equity opportunities and the potential increased digital divide.
We actually talked about writing a book on that because it's a passion of both of ours. I come from a very poor rural background, and the it was difficult for me to get access. In some areas, it's difficult because of the area. In some areas, it's difficult because of the money. But as an example, I wrote a tool recently that I was using, and I was using one of the latest models, the 4.0 model, with not the very latest, but the one behind that. And I was just testing an interactive agent that I was going to use in a classroom. And I just had it sit there and kind of work for a second. It spent $15 in tokens in 30 minutes. And we have 300 teachers or 300 staff members here. We have a couple hundred teachers, and then we have a couple of thousand students. It would be easy to imagine you getting a really big token bill. So then I start looking for these
Mm,
companies, and I say, okay, you already have a function. How much would it charge? Instead of me developing myself, how much would it be for me to use yours? Well, that's $10 per student, or $20 per person per month. Well, suddenly you've got a $20,000 bill, and
mm,
that's if the school provides it.
yeah.
Take that kid home. We've got 30% of our kids who don't have good internet connectivity at home. First of all, they have a hard time connecting. Second of all, there's no way that their parents are going to be able to afford $30 a month for them to use it. So we're seeing it. We saw it a lot because of COVID, because we had a one-to-one Chromebook initiative already, so we had that part, but we had the issues with connectivity. So I am 100% in agreement with you that the digital divide could be greatly exacerbated if we don't figure out how to get these companies to make some exceptions for I mean, if you want us to educate your
Yes.
kids on how to use this stuff because they're the future, then you're going to have to make it where we can actually afford to use it.
Mm. So in New Zealand, we have an agreement between the government to fund Google and Microsoft to provide their services for free for all schools in New Zealand. And I'm
Wow.
It's good.
expecting, yeah, I'm expecting that, and that's been around for, gosh, since I was in school as a high school student, that existed. And so as it's developed and these new opportunities are in there, we have noticed some of the features like recording in Google Meetings and some of the more interesting features that you might like to have in Google Workspace. You need to upgrade from the freer version to have access to those. So I'm looking with
Us too.
interest to see what happens with the AI tools with Google and with Copilot. At the moment, Copilot's really open. Schools can do some incredible things with Copilot and building their own knowledge bases depending on the level of licensing that they have
Yes.
around differentiation. And Maury, you mentioned this around differentiation for students and developing materials for neurodiverse students. What have you seen as some really good strategies to enable that differentiation, like the translation one that you mentioned before?
To me, some of the best differentiation. I mean, I don't know if this is this way in New Zealand, but here we have like students who are on what they call a 504, which is like a special
Uh-oh. I think we lost her.
education
There we
program.
go.
Like maybe did you lose me?
Oh, we did for a second. You glitched for a
Yeah, for
second,
a
but you're
second.
back again.
So we have things called IEPs and 504s for students who need certain types of differentiation. Like maybe I have a student who I cannot give them an open-ended question on a test. Maybe I have a student that I have to have the test read to them or the material read to them. So anytime you bring an AI into it where it's like, okay, you're going to put your headset on and I've taken a PDF of whatever it is that I'm giving you, be it a worksheet or a test or a story that we have to read, a math homework, anything like that. If I can put that PDF into Claude or into one of those AIs, have you put your headset on and then have it read it out loud to you. And then you can interact with what you say. Can you repeat that? Can you pause? Can you, that's huge differentiation because let's face it, the funding for public education is getting as such to where our class sizes are getting larger and larger. So if I have 30 kids in my room and 10 of those kids have to have the test read to them or material read to them, then I need that assistant. I need AI as an assistant. The other things for differentiation is that, okay, I have a lesson plan. And this is something I think teachers are a little, especially veteran teachers, we've been doing lesson plans for a long time. I don't need to ask an AI to do a lesson plan on photosynthesis in the 5E model. I already have that. I've been teaching that lesson for 5 years now, but maybe that AI can help me add some additional content for engagement. Maybe that AI can help me take that test and make it to where I'm not having to tell this one kid, okay, this is a 10-question quiz. I want you to only answer 5 questions because I know that your IEP says that you can't do open-ended questions, but I can have my AI do all 10 questions that are multiple choice. And that way that student, I'm still getting a good picture. I'm getting good assessment data on if that kid knows that material without me having to take all this time to actually write multiple copies of test.
Mm,
The storytelling, the differentiation in the reading levels, being able to take like The Great Gatsby and put in the first 3 paragraphs that we're reading and put it in vocabulary that is on a 9th grade level
mm,
instead of vocabulary that's in The Great Gatsby, and then be able to have that absolute open-ended, intense discussion. Again, it brings you back to that engagement piece.
mm,
If it's on their level, they're going to engage even more. And then you can do a one-to-one correlation. This is a 9th grade vocab word. Guess what? In The Great Gatsby, this is that vocab word. And let's up our vocabulary that way.
mm,
So I am personally very excited about what it can do for differentiation because the levels in the classroom are so varying now.
mm.
A lot of people say it's COVID, and that did definitely affect us. But I think it was coming anyway. It was coming down the pipe anyway because of the amount of entertainment and amount of things that kids do that just completely distract them from education.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree with you. Just as we wrap up, I'm cognizant of time. Do you have any parting thoughts for educators dipping their toes into AI? And then also, secondly, as you wrap up, let us know what's the best way to get hold of you both to engage your services.
Best way is, of course, we have a website. AIEdPro.com. We do not just in-person trainings where we'll come into your school system and spend a day with you and have a lot of fun, but we also do webinars and things like that. We have a partner out of Houston called Fried Tech, FRIEDTECH, Fried Tech. They're a sales arm that we deal with a lot that does a lot of professional development. If I was going to tell a teacher what to do to get their toes wet, the very first thing that I would do is I would get the free version of ChatGPT, and I would put it on my phone, I'd put it on my computer, and I would just start having conversations with it. I mean, and you can get into some great, as Jim says, it's the one thing you can have, like a technical conversation in the morning and a philosophical conversation in the afternoon. So just get to know the AI, because it's that human interaction with voice, that large language, the language model is what is making it so different from what we are accustomed to. So that's what I would suggest.
Very good. Jim, would you like to unmute and share something?
What I typically do is tell people this is the most fun thing to play with. Put the app on your phone, take a picture of something, and I've used Google, I've used various tools. There's another fun tool called Character AI, which allows you to interact with, I set it up to interact with Albert Einstein. You can build your own characters in it. There's a lot of different fun ways. The most important thing we tell teachers is just have fun with it. If you treat it as a tool, it's going to be boring. If you treat it as a fun little thing to play with, then you'll get better with it, because you'll start understanding it. It's sort of like starting out doing Google search and you're terrible at it, but over time you get really good at it. Well, with these tools, it's even easier because you can talk about anything. You can ask it for a recipe. You can, ask it for just about anything you can think of, and it'll probably give you some kind of answer, and you can move from there. Don't pick a point. Don't pick a specific point. Pick any point and just kind of start and move from there and see where it takes you.
Love it. Maurie and Jim, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Sure.
Yes.
Appreciate you having us. Thank you.